Good morning. I am out here reconnecting with nature. Actually, it's starting to rain, so I'm not going to do that anymore. I am no longer reconnecting with nature. I just ate some salami and now my phone screen is covered in grease. I finished Danganronpa 3. This video is about to be deeply controversial. If you don't like what I have to say, I suggest, I don't know, clicking off, scrolling, who cares. Also, spoilers for every Danganronpa thing. I finished Danganronpa 3, and I am fucking livid by the ending. I really liked Danganronpa 3. I thought it fixed so many of the issues that I had with Danganronpa 1 and 2. My main issue with Danganronpa 1, and to a lesser extent Danganronpa 2, was the tone and the pacing. Danganronpa 1, Trigger Happy Havoc, I think is the absolute worst offender of this, where the content of the game is clearly meant for an older audience. Like, there's mature themes, there's a lot of violence and adult themes and sexuality, and just, it's not for children. But the way that the game plays out, you'd think that the developers thought it was for little kids, with the constant repeating over and over and over of things. That, or they thought that their game was so dense that people were going to be playing it in very short, like 20-minute periods of time once a week. Either way, it is endlessly frustrating. Like, why are we doing this hand-holding as if we're young children? Danganronpa 2 doesn't do this nearly as much as Danganronpa 1, but it does do it, and it's very frustrating. Danganronpa 3, I think, nearly fixes this problem. They don't really repeat themselves endlessly like the other game does. Also, with Danganronpa 3, each game had a character, at least one character, that I could not fucking stand. Danganronpa has a couple of character archetypes that they fall back on, and one is a girl who is incredibly, obnoxiously insecure and speaks very slowly and has an annoying voice actress and is also weird and maybe rude. Toko. Mikan. I fucking hate whatever that is, and Danganronpa 3 did not do that. There are no human characters that I despise in Danganronpa 3, like in the previous games. However, the mono bears are the worst thing to ever happen to fiction. Get those stupid fucking bears out of my goddamn face. You could have completely removed them from the game and replaced them with nothing, and it would have significantly improved everything about everything. They served no purpose. I waited the entire game for them to become plot relevant, and they never did. They existed solely to piss me the fuck off and waste my goddamn time. They would show up and have the world's most obnoxious cutscenes and then fuck off. And it sucked. I hated them. I dreaded every moment they were on screen. I muted my TV often. I hated them. Absolutely useless. I was so happy when they were all killed off, and then they returned, and I was pissed. And then I was happy again when Monokubs started murdering them. I hated those fucking bears. Absolute waste of space. I don't have a lot to say about most of the game. I liked Danganronpa 3. Everything fell apart in the last chapter. I have never in my entire life hated the ending of something quite like I do with this. I heard it was controversial the way it ended. I had some really vague idea of what was happening. The way it played out was the stupidest, most frustrating thing I have ever witnessed in my entire life. The writing, all of a sudden, it's some of the worst writing I've seen in a published work of fiction. For a game that was pretty clear and concise up until this point, I found myself in the last, 2 hours of this game constantly pausing and having to think for a second to comprehend what the fuck anyone was talking about. I also understand fiction having an ambiguous ending. I personally don't like ambiguous endings. This was not just an ambiguous ending. This was the writers throwing a bunch of shit at you, raising a ton of questions, and then answering none of them. It's like they purposely created confusion to have an ambiguous ending, and it made no goddamn sense. I have so many questions that were raised by the last trial that were not answered that I'm not even sure I understood what happened or what the point was. I've never seen anything like what happened in the last 2 hours of this game. Never. I've never seen writing this bad. It's like they fired their entire writing staff and hired, like, one 6th grader who, like, isn't particularly good at story writing or the English language. The gameplay of the last trial was incredibly overstimulating. I had to mute my TV for a lot of it because it was painful for me to watch and to listen to. So, here's the thing. The end trial of Danganronpa 3 made some very specific points. It raised some very specific ideas, and it answered none of them. The entire end of that game hinges on the fact that the characters in the death game in Danganronpa 3 are fictional characters. That's great. The game never once explained what exactly they meant by that, which is interesting, because that is what the entire fucking plot hinges on. Are they actors? Are their bodies physically in the room and they're actors in costumes who have been brainwashed? Are they in a fucking VR headset like in Danganronpa 2? I thought that they were actors and that their bodies were physically on a set somewhere. My mom thought that they were in VR and that they were being pulled out as they died and that we were looking at, like, digital representations of them. I had so many theories passing through my mind about what that could mean because the game never fucking explained it. They just said, you're fictional characters. What does that mean? Fuck you. The game also heavily emphasized that the remaining characters that were alive in the last trial had nothing waiting for them in the outside world. They said this particular phrase over and over and over and over again, and never elaborated on what the fuck that meant. I took it as they're orphans, maybe, and they've lost all sense of who they are, so, like, if I entered the killing game and I was given this new persona and my name was fucking Jim, and I was like, I want to escape the killing game, and Samugi was like, no, Jim, there's no Dimitri anymore. You're just Jim now. Like, what does that mean? What does that mean? They never elaborated. If fucking Suichi turned around in that trial and walked right out the door and made it to the outside world, does he spontaneously combust? Does he get murdered by angry mobs immediately? Look, what does that mean? They drove that point home so many times, over and over and over again. You are a fictional character and you cannot leave Danganronpa. What does that mean? Does that mean that because Suichi is a fictional character, that if Suichi goes outside, he's contextless now, and he's just nothing and a nobody? Like, what the fuck does that mean? This is not an ambiguous, open ending, open for interpretation. This is nonsense. This is abysmal writing. There was some good about it. I personally thought that Kibo's inner voice was going to be Makoto, who I thought that was going to be like Makoto trying to communicate with people, and then it got fucked up somehow. It being the audience, I thought was absolutely fascinating. I thought that it was very interesting that because hope always wins, that's why the killing game continues. I thought that the whole reality TV thing, it ruined all of the stakes of the game and of the previous games. It never touched on whether or not the dead people were actually dead or not. That was a big topic in the second game. When they figured out they were in a simulation, they immediately were like, well, are our friends alive? Nobody even brought that up once in the third game, which I thought was weird. Because again, if it's a simulation, can we do what they did in the second game and, like, maybe wake up, maybe not? Are we actors? Like, they raise all these questions that they never, ever answer. And it makes no sense. It makes the second game not really make any sense either, because if the second game is, part of this Danganronpa TV series or whatever, then what was up with the Future Foundation and them waking up and being on the island? Like, it really honestly just didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. It was written fucking terribly. Editor's note. When I say, the writing was bad, I don't just mean, like, the ideas and the direction in which the game went was bad. Like, yes, I think the storytelling was bad. But the writing itself in that last trial took such a sharp downturn in quality. Like, I personally believe that the final trial could have been half as long. It was like 90% word salad sentences of nothing. Like, the characters were saying words in English, but it was just nothing. Nobody was really saying anything. Most of what Samugi said during that trial was just nothing. It was just nothing. The tiniest nugget of new information would be presented, like, maybe every 20 minutes, and I'd be like, oh, wow, and then they would not elaborate. It's mind-boggling to me how they stretched out that trial and made it as long as it was while saying almost nothing. Like, it's mind-boggling to me how they revealed the truth and all of this stuff and somehow said nothing. Like, Samugi, that whole time, just nothing. It was all filler words. The whole trial was just filler words. It was nothing. It was just every character going, oh my god, I can't believe this. This is so crazy. And then, like, every 20 minutes or half an hour, some tiny nugget of new information would be implied, and I was like, oh, is something happening? And you know what? No, nothing's happening. Actually. It's insane. I've never felt this way about a piece of media. I've never experienced this with a piece of media. It's fucking mind-boggling. And before this trial, I truly thought that Danganronpa 3 had the strongest writing and story out of any of the Danganronpas. I was really, really excited to see how it turned out, and it took the sharpest downturn I've ever seen in a piece of media. I've never been this angry at the way something has ended. I typically don't like endings in media. I think people have a really hard time writing satisfying endings. So when I don't like an ending to something, I'm like, well, alright, I figured that I wouldn't like it. This pissed me off so bad. I feel like I have wasted years of my time. I'm irate at the way this ended. I can't believe that they wrote that trial to play out the way that it did, and everybody was like, yeah, this storytelling is cohesive and makes sense. It doesn't. It makes no goddamn sense. I have so many fucking questions. Like, they raised all of these questions and answered none of them. Yeah, so those are my thoughts. I really enjoyed the game up until the last trial, where I thought the gameplay was obnoxious and confusing and overstimulating. I thought that the writing was abysmal. I thought that the ideas presented were abysmal. I thought all of it was bullshit, and I'm angry and betrayed, and it fucking sucks. Danganronpa, the end of Danganronpa 3 is the worst ending in any piece of fiction I have ever encountered in my entire life. I don't think I have anything else productive to say about it, because I'm just going to keep circling back to how the fuck did this get published like this. Well, alright, that's that. I've had enough. Bye.